decided this week to spend a couple of lessons on the idea of the heart. And the first one that was looked at, or that I was able to deliver live at the building, or will be delivering live at the building, will be on the idea of keeping the heart pure. And so what I thought I'd look at with this particular time period is what we find in John chapter 14, verses 1 through 11. And so what we'll go ahead and do is we'll read John 14, 1 through 11, and then we will go ahead and begin our look at what this has to teach us. Beginning in verse 1, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to me, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know." Verse 5. Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on, you know him and have seen him." Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is sufficient for us." And Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak in you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does the works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves." And so we're going to pick up, as I mentioned, on the idea of not being troubled. And this is kind of the image that comes to mind when people are in despair or struggling, and you can see a lot of different terminology: sadness, grief, anguish, despair, heartache, mourning, misery, woe, anguish, feeling let down. I mean, there's all of these different kinds of feelings that come along with a troubled heart. And so I want to look at this from a standpoint of beginning, why would Jesus feel the need to address the disciples in this manner? What is it that may have caused them to have a troubled heart and cause for him to give this particular statement? And to do that, we can go back and we can look at some of the things that were said in the previous chapter, in the 13th chapter of John. And the first is the idea of betrayal. And the thought of a betrayal taking place might have been something that was concerning to the disciples, because in verse 21, when Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified, "Most assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And so there may have been this troubling idea. They know the Lord. They know that he is not one that would lie to them. And so having him make this particular statement would certainly be a troubling thing within their minds. Another reason, in John chapter 13 and verse 37, we see Peter says unto him, "Lord, why can I not follow thee now?" And so there is this idea that Jesus is going away. In verse 36, John chapter 13 and verse 36 says, "Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward." Which means that there is going to be a time of separation. There's going to be a time that the disciples can't be together with Jesus. And so certainly having had that opportunity to be a witness to the things that he had done and to be a part of and see the teachings that had taken place, it would have been difficult for them to begin to think about the idea of being separated from him. And then the last thing that we'll give as an example from the 13th chapter of the book of John is the prediction that Peter will deny Jesus. In John chapter 13, in verses 37 and 38, it says, Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake. And Jesus answered him, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. And so certainly this would be something in particular that would be troublesome in the heart of Peter, as you consider this idea of where he says, I would be willing to lay down my life for you. And Jesus says, the rooster will not crow until you've denied me 3 times. This is about to take place. This is something that is about to happen. And so certainly this could have been something that would have been troubling in the mind of Peter. And certainly if the disciples hear that Peter is going to deny Christ, that's something that may have troubled them as well, something that may have been hard for them to think about or imagine. And so he gives them these reasons potentially in verse 13, and it's not his intent to create a troubled heart, but there are all these reasons as to why they might have one. And then we get into John the 14th chapter, and he gives them the solutions. In the New King James Version, in verse 1, it says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. That's the solution to a troubled heart. It is to believe in Jesus. And this particular idea is something that goes beyond just the idea of something that the disciples need to do. As Christians, if we want to find a cure for our distress, for our troubled hearts, because again, this is an example for us. I mean, this is something that takes place that is an example of people who may have troubled hearts, but it relates to us today, and certainly we looked at various things that may be causes for us to have a troubled heart. And just like the disciples and being told that you believe in God, believe also in me, that is what Christians need to do. We need to put our trust into Jesus and believe in him. And if we will do that, then there will be no reason for us to have a troubled heart. Then we will not fear what comes. Then we will not have that troubled heart. If we trust in Jesus, we will find a sense of peace that goes beyond that. And then there are reasons why we should believe in him, and there are reasons why we should trust him. And the first idea that I used as far as the term that I chose was the term integrity, that Jesus was a man of integrity. And as we go through, it's going to list for us in these verses the reason why we should trust him. The 11 verses that we've just gone through go through this process of explaining to us the solution, and that we should not have a troubled heart because we can trust him, and that the disciples should not have had troubled hearts. Picking up at verse 2, he says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And so this idea, if this isn't true, then you don't have any reason to believe in me. You don't have any reason not to feel that you should have a troubled heart. He's saying you don't need to have a troubled heart because I'm going to prepare a place for you. You don't need to worry about it. Trust in me. This is what I mentioned earlier, the idea that the reason their heart may be troubled is because he said some things that would have been concerning, and they know that he would not lie. that he is a man of integrity. And so this idea he's saying here is that, trust me, I'm a man of integrity. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if it were not so, I would have told you. Again, looking at verse 2. If it were not so, I would have told you. So if this isn't the truth, if there aren't many mansions, if there aren't many places in the Father's kingdom that are being prepared for, something being prepared for us, he never would have said so. The second reason that we can find is that he is going to come again. And we understand that as Christians today, and there are various passages that speak to this idea. But in keeping with our text here in John the 14th chapter, in verse 3, after saying he's gone to prepare a place, he follows up and says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And when you stop and you think about it, and we read about all of the glory that is heaven, and we have all of the various descriptions of what heaven is going to be like, the real reason that heaven is going to be glorious is because it will be the place where God and Christ dwell, and we will dwell with them. It is the place where God and Christ dwell, and we will have an opportunity to dwell there with them. That's what makes it so wonderful. It's the idea of getting to be with the very one whom laid down his life for us. It is the idea of getting to be with the creator of all mankind. And so there is a great reason to trust and to have confidence in him and not to worry. He's a man of integrity. He doesn't lie, and we can trust him when he says, I will come again, which means we don't need a troubled heart. In particular, in the context, for them, he's saying, you don't need to have a troubled heart, despite the fact that I'm going away, because he said he's going away. I will, I will return to you, and when I do, then where I am, you may be as well. And so they don't need to be troubled at the idea that for a time there will be separation. In John chapter 14, continuing on in verse 6, one of the things that we can look at, and we'll look at verses 4 through 6, is he says, and where I go you know, and the way you know. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so we get this idea, as we can see, that there is only one way. And when we talk about the idea there is only one way to get somewhere, that means that you can't get there by any other path. You can't get there through any other method. So if we were to look at it from the idea of when we think of traveling somewhere, if there's only one way to get from point A to point B, and people go 2 or 3 different ways, no matter how hard they try, if they're not going that one way, they're never going to reach the goal of where they want to be. And so this idea of there being only one way, and it's through Jesus. And so we also recognize then that in this fact, that if it is through Jesus, that you're not going to get there through any other religious leader. You're not going to get there through Buddha. You're not going to get there through Joseph Smith. You're not going to get to heaven by going through the path of your parents or a family member or a friend. The only way that you're going to get to heaven is through Jesus Christ. And that's how you will make it to where the Father is. He also makes the statement, I am the truth. And we've been looking at, and we talked about, again, integrity. Jesus Christ himself cannot lie. What he says is truth. He is the truth, and it is through him, and if he is truth, it is through his truth that we will get to the Father. And then he makes the statement or the idea, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So here's another reason to trust him. We're going to look at verses 7 through 11 here, and they may be a little bit hard to see, but we're going to then go through and pull some points out on our next slide, and then we will close out the lesson for you. But picking up at verse 7 again, it says, "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also, and from now on you know him and have seen him." And Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is sufficient for us." So he's saying, you've seen him. And Philip's saying, show us. And so Jesus says to him, "Have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does the works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves. So believe me based on what you've seen. If you don't believe me based on my words, believe me based on the works that I have done, and it will also involve the works that he will do." And so the point that he's making, and the final reason that we're going to look at in our text as to why we should trust him, is that seeing Jesus and recognizing whom Jesus is shows us who and causes us to recognize who God the Father is. And so here are the key points that we can lay out from verses 7 through 11 in the statements that he says to point this out. He says, "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also." So again, there is this connection to knowing Jesus means knowing God. Seeing Jesus means seeing God. And so he says, from now on, you know him and you have seen him. Have they seen God with their eyes? They've seen Christ with their eyes. And so they have seen God because they have seen God in Jesus. And he says, "He who has seen me has seen the Father. Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The Father who dwells in me does the works." And so all of this idea of the reason that we can trust Jesus is because Jesus is a part of the Godhead. Jesus is a part of God. He says, "Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me." And because of this, the things that he does and the things that he says are the things that he does and the things that he says, because of the fact that the Father is in him and he is in the Father. And so the conclusion, once again, to the whole matter is to remind ourselves to let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. There's no reason to worry. There's no reason to fret. There's no reason to be afraid, no matter what this world throws at us. And in this past year, it's thrown a lot. And in this year, there'll be more to come. But if we take the time to believe in God, we need not have a troubled heart, and we need not worry. Take the time to not just believe in God, but to believe in Jesus Christ, his Son, and the words that he has said. Thank you.